Welcome to Nailing the Apex, everybody. I'm Tim Haraney. We start this show with Sergio Perez news as Sergio and Red Bull Racing have agreed to part ways. Now, Adam and I held off publishing this podcast because I had known that this news was coming on the Wednesday. Adam and I had taped on a Monday, and we had discussed what we should do. So we pretty much figured that I would add just a little bit off the top before getting into the full podcast. But if you want to go ahead and fast forward to the intro, go for it. If not, if you want to stick around and listen to a little bit more about what happened between Sergio and Red Bull, here we go. So you have to remember that Sergio Perez was out of contract at the end of this season, and that was dating back to mid-April of 2024. But he was extended on June the 4th of this year after, again, a string of really strong results. But then it just totally dropped off performance-wise for himself. His last podium was in China. Now, there was a buyout. We don't know the exact numbers of how much Red Bull had to buy Sergio out of this contract extension that he had signed. Some numbers I had heard floating around were about 35 million. That was when I was in Abu Dhabi. But Helmut Marko did say that the numbers that were floating around weren't at all accurate. But there was a buyout. We just don't know how much it actually was for Red Bull to buy Sergio out of his deal. Let's just jump back to the performance for a second. Now, you can understand why Red Bull wanted to part ways. I mean, a 280-point deficit between Verstappen and Checo is absolutely massive, and you just can't have a deficit that size between two teammates when you're trying to win a Constructors' Championship or trying to get high up in a Constructors' Championship, because you have to remember the payouts, right? Like Red Bull got $140 million for winning the Constructors' Championship last year. And so to win it again, you have to remember how much money and how important this is to the teams. I mean, Sergio's sponsors weren't going to be able to make up that type of a difference. That's a huge gap. So these teams take this championship, this team's championship, like I've told you on this pod, they take it very seriously. So he had that massive shunt in Monaco, which added to, I would say, a hefty damage bill for Sergio. Then post Monaco, Red Bull gave him that contract extension just to help settle him down. And then the qualifying performances started to get really rough from then on out. And then remember, he crashed in Hungary. He was second on the grid in Spa, but squandered that potential at a podium or even race win because the car actually looked really solid for Spa. And again, Spa, very high performance, very fast racetrack, kind of similar to that of Suzuka. Sergio did well in Suzuka, trying to match up against Max and Suzuka this season went really well for him. He performed exceptionally at a very daunting racetrack in a difficult car to handle. But again, squandered an opportunity there in Spa, I think, where he probably should have won. Mexico, just his home race was a disaster. I was there for that whole thing, and you know what, that was a very difficult weekend for him. And it was that weekend where I was told that it'd be difficult for Sergio to see out the rest of the season because they were considering dropping him then, from what I was told. That was a rumor that was going around in the paddock. I don't know how much I was willing to believe that, simply because of the sponsors that were and are attached to Sergio at that moment. Qatar was the next one. I mean, bounced in SQ1, then in the Grand Prix, spun off on his own account, burnt out the clutch trying to get the car righted. And that was essentially the end of his race there, and just was a difficult season for him, top to bottom. I aside from the first 4 or 5 races where, you know, he performed quite well, he stayed close to Max, there just really isn't any bright spots to really pull from. I mean, Azerbaijan, that was looking like a good performance track for him, but again, just couldn't bring it home and complete the task by grabbing a podium or even a win necessarily. So I heard from Christian Horner today on a Wednesday, taping this on a Wednesday evening. Horner had said it was a logical decision to re-sign Sergio for 2025 and 2026, considering his performances in the first 4 races, which I had mentioned off of the top. But I think eventually, the lack of performance from Sergio then on out, Horner had said that the car did become more narrow in the performance window, and Sergio just couldn't really figure that out, where it's kind of like the harder the driver tries, usually the slower you go. I know that sounds weird, but it actually is true. It's usually when you're in a race car and you're trying hard, you're going slower. You need to let the car do work for you so you get that performance back. But if you don't trust the car, then you're not going to get that performance back. And if the setup window is narrow, you really miss a lot of your opportunities and chances to get the tire in the right operating window so you can gain and get the performance from the car. And, all of that just, gets in your head after a while as a driver. And I think that really hurt the team quite a bit in the Constructors' Championship. I mean, obviously, but really hurt him and his confidence in the car and everything. That's not Horner saying that. That's me saying that. But Christian Horner did also talk about the drivers that could be in line to take Sergio's seat. And Horner said Yuki and Liam Lawson, both strong credentials from those drivers, and those two will be the 2 drivers that they're going to have a look at. I'll get into them in a few minutes here, but Horner did also draw comparisons between teammates for next season, and said that 2025 is going to be the closest contested F1 championship ever. And he's not wrong. I definitely agree with him. I think next year's F1 championship is probably going to be one of the craziest ones we've ever been a part of. I mean, I really hope so. It kind of is trending in that direction where, you're probably going to have 3, maybe 4 teams fighting for a Constructors' Championship. You're probably going to have 3, maybe 4 drivers fighting for a driver's title. If you look at Ferrari, you have the incoming Lewis Hamilton partnered up with Charles Leclerc. You look over at McLaren, again, that is one of the strongest driver lineups on the grid with Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. Then you've got George Russell, who's no slouch, obviously, and then Max as well. And it's kind of, who are you going to partner with Max to help you win that Constructors' Championship, because of how much money is involved and just how important it is to these teams. So I'll answer the one question of, where does Sergio go at this moment? And from my knowledge and people I've spoken to, he's going to take some time out. He's going to take a bit of time out and reflect a little bit on what he wants to do and what he wants to do with his future moving forward. I think there are some possibilities that could exist for him to get back onto an F1 grid in the future. I'll touch on that in a few minutes' time when we go to questions. But yeah, so who takes that second seat at Red Bull Racing? I mean, that's going to be the interesting question. I mean, my gut tells me that it is going to be Liam Lawson who will take that seat. But, I mean, Yuki did do a very impressive test for the team last week in Abu Dhabi following the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. From what I was told, it was a strong test. He didn't have that much difficulty getting up to speed with the car. And I think when you're dealing with a car as tricky as the RB20 was, that's a pretty good sign. I mean, that's very positive for a driver and then also for a team. But does the team and certain personnel within the team have their own opinion on Yuki Tsunoda and whether or not he can do that job and stick with Max Verstappen, help them win a Constructors' Championship next year? Or is the decision already been made in some people's minds that he isn't good enough to partner Max? That is going to be the question that needs to be answered, and it'll be interesting to see who Red Bull come up with. I mean, my gut says it's probably going to be Liam Lawson. I feel Yuki Tsunoda does deserve a chance. I don't think it's a great idea to throw Liam Lawson into the seat beside Max, and that's not me downplaying Liam Lawson's talent. He's a very talented driver. It's the fact that Yuki has more experience. He has more Formula One experience. He has more experience to deal with certain situations and difficulties that could arise where, I mean, Lawson hasn't had to deal with any of those things just yet. And I think if you're Red Bull Racing, when you look at their ladder system, when you look at their young drivers, they've been very, very hard on their young driver program. That's a very difficult program to kind of make your way through. And you look at Gasly, you look at Albon. I mean, those two are very capable race car drivers. You look at how strong Gasly was this season. He had no crash damage. Really helped that team, muscle and claw their way through the constructor standings. And then you look at Alex Albon. Last year, he was incredible. This year, not so much. Really difficult season for Alex. But that being said, he is a talent. James Vowles rates him very high. James Vowles has worked with some of the greatest drivers in Formula One. And when you're rating Alex Albon that highly and you believe in him that much by giving him the contract that he did, I mean, it says a lot of Alex Albon's talent. And so with Red Bull, it just sometimes it can be too much of quickly get the driver in and then they're quickly jettisoned out of the seat. Kind of need to keep them around. You need to build the confidence. You need to let them learn. You need to let them make mistakes. When you move to the big team like Red Bull Racing, there is no room for that. Where for Yuki, he's already gone through those 3 years, right? He's already made those mistakes. He's already learned. He is ready for this seat, I think, in my opinion. But let's see what happens. Red Bull Racing hasn't made any announcements on the drivers. They're going to let this thing breathe for a bit. As for Racing Bulls, because there will be a seat available there from whichever of Liam Lawson or Yuki Tsunoda goes up to the big team, Isaac Hajar, I think, is going to be coming in and taking that seat. Isaac Hajar, obviously a Formula 2 driver. He's also part of the Red Bull Racing program. Interesting young talent. I really am interested to see what he does in Formula 1 next year. Let's take some of your questions because I did put a call out for it. From Dan Murphy. I guess this isn't really a question, but I'll read it out. It's a very nice message from Dade. Really appreciate it, dude. This show has been amazing all year. I don't think I skipped an episode. Thank you, Tim, for providing excellent content. You're very welcome. And Adam, for being an amazing host. Can't wait for year 3 of the podcast coming in 2025. Big thanks to Adam. I mean, Adam's been huge jumping on this show and hosting. I mean, I know I did a lot of the hosting stuff last year, and it was a lot for me to kind of just host and then also try to, deliver the goods at the same time. Adam felt this direction was better. I agree with it. I agreed with him immediately when we had a discussion about it in the winter of 2023. And you know what? The more Adam and I work together, the more we build that chemistry. I do really love working with Adam. It was Adam's idea to bring me over to the network, and so yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I've had a great time. From Steve Beans, this is all on Blue Sky. It's extremely likely at this time that Lawson replaces Perez, but should it be Tsunoda? Is Red Bull making the right call here? Also, what are some notable things that we should be looking out for in the offseason, if at all, any? Look, I think for Red Bull, making the right call, that's the most important thing, right, Steve? I mean, they have to make the right call on this driver shuffle that they're doing, because when you get into next season and you're not confident in your driver lineup, or your driver lineup, there's like a weak link in it, I mean, you're going to be exposed very quickly. And the likelihood of winning a Constructors' Championship is slim to none, because next season, looking at just how competitive everybody is going to be, I mean, it's going to be really difficult for these teams to battle for a constructors championship, because I think it's going to be obviously more than two who are going to be fighting for it. I really see three, maybe four, and I think Red Bull isn't even going to be one of those strong teams for next season. Now, I'm not saying that Max can't win another championship. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that from the standpoint of who are going to be the strongest teams on the grid next year, I don't think it's going to be Red Bull Racing. I think McLaren's going to pick up right where they left off. I think Ferrari is as well. And you got to look out for the Mercedes at the same time, because I think Mercedes is not messing around next year, right? Like, they're going to be pushing hard. They're going to be pushing Kimi Antonelli hard as well. George is going to be the one steering that ship. We'll just see if George is going to be able to not only teach Kimi, but also drag Mercedes up in the constructor standings. From Cameron, is Red Bull not announcing anyone because they want to give Checo his moment, or do they truly not know? Also, did you wait to record because you knew this news was imminent? Cameron, yeah, so they're going to let this thing breathe a bit, give Checo his moment before they make any sort of announcements. They'll probably have a signing in the next few days, I believe. And then we'll probably get an announcement either towards the end of this week, not this week, then maybe in the new year. But yeah, also, did I wait to record because I knew this news was it? Yes, we did, actually. Well, we pre-recorded something so I could just slap this onto the front of it. From Tamara Sutherland on Blue Sky. Tamara, thank you so much for your questions this year. Really do appreciate that. It's probably too late for Sergio Perez to secure a full-time seat in another series for 2025, but what are your thoughts on what he may pursue next? Some events such as Le Mans and the Indy 500 bringing additional openings for drivers, but do you know if there's others he could be considering? Well, Tamara, at this moment, I think Sergio's just going to lie low. He's going to take stock, and then he's going to figure out what he wants to do next. I think there could be a place for him at Cadillac. I mean, Sergio's got the budget. He's a race winner, Grand Prix winner. And then I think when you're looking at, who do you want on that team, right? If you're Cadillac and you're new starting out, and I make this argument later in the pod, and I still back it. I still think Valtteri Bottas would be the best fit for that Cadillac program. But that being said, I'm sure Sergio will be having conversations with them, and they would definitely entertain them. You have to remember that Sergio has such a big following in North America and Mexico, and really tapping into those markets for Cadillac, I think, would be very important. I think also, on top of all that, the knowledge that he brings, how much he's been in Formula One, how much he's done in Formula One. I mean, that holds a lot of value. I mean, people may look at Sergio and be like, oh, he sucks, he's slow. He's not, right? Like, he has a lot of knowledge that he can really bring to a team. He can really bring a lot of value in terms of getting your engineering program up to snuff, what the car needs, what he thinks the car direction should be going in, right? Because he's been through so many iterations of Formula One cars, and there's a lot to be said for all that. Twitter, Hassan Salim. Do you think Oscar Piastri will give Lando Norris a tough competition right from the start in 2025? Or, given that it'll only be his third season in F1, he's still a bit rusty around the edges? You know what? I think Oscar is going to give Lando everything that he can handle at the start of next season and for the entire season. I could see Oscar being one of those drivers who could be in contention for a driver's championship. I really do. He's that talented. I'm really excited to see what Piastri does in 2025. And yeah, he's going to be tough competition for Lando. And I think, Lando knows that, and he wants that, right? I think Lando wants as much competition as he can get so he can go up against the likes of Verstappen and come out the other side as a winner. From Jonathan Ricci, does Yuki deserve the second seat of Red Bull Racing over Liam Lawson? Yes, he does. I really do think he does. It's not saying anything bad about Liam Lawson and not trying to put down anything that Liam Lawson has done, but Yuki has that experience, and I just think that's so crucial when it comes to Formula One, especially in 2025. From Caden Lee, who is a sleeper pick to get some podiums or wins next season? Oh my God. Okay, we haven't even gotten to next year yet. I got to think about this one because that's a tough one. Usually I save this stuff for after testing, and we haven't seen any cars on the track for next year, obviously, because we're still in 2024. Oh my God. Sleeper picks for next year. Look, I think if Aston Martin can get it together and maybe by halfway, like the halfway point of next year, maybe they come with something that's totally revised in terms of their race car. And then maybe, Lance or Fernando actually, start getting some podiums. Wins may be difficult for both drivers, only because of just how stiff the competition is going to be at the front. But yeah, sleeper picks, I'd be surprised. I mean, I would love to see Aston Martin get up there. And you know what? I think it's possible. Like once we get past halfway, at the beginning of the season, though, Caden, I think it's going to be really tough for a team like Aston Martin. I think it's going to be hard for them straight out of the gates because they ended the season in such a tough place that they have so much performance that they need to find with the car. Dan Fallow's not working on next year's car, and then you have your big. Your big signee of Adrian Newey not coming in until March, and so you have to look at all of that because they don't really have that staple at the top who's sort of dictating what they want with the race car just yet. But I think like once Newey gets involved next year, I think you're going to see that car change dramatically and very, very quickly. That's why I say I can see them being strong when we get to like halfway through the season. Anyways, thank you so much, everybody, for sticking with me on that one. And thanks again, everyone, for your questions. Thanks for your questions all season long. Really appreciate it. And thanks again for watching and listening. You've really helped this show grow, and I'm really, really appreciative of it. So, thanks again, everybody. Wow, I've been talking for 22 minutes straight. I just honestly didn't feel like it. Felt like 10 minutes. Anyways, anyways, on to the show.
Well, it's the end of the season. And Tim, I can't believe we're here already. It happens. Sometimes you're 17 races in and you're like, oh, the season's like, whoa, it feels, and then it's bang, done, over. Kind of crazy how that happens, isn't it?
Yeah, you're kind of waiting till the next time I have to pack my bag and head back out onto the road again, right? This is like,
yeah.
Now I'm just like counting down the days, and I've only been home for a week.
and then by the way, just so I know, next season does start in Australia this time, right?
It does. Yeah, we have testing in Bahrain towards the end of February, and then first race is in Australia, which is like I guess a more typical Formula One season, the way it should start. For some people, it should start in Australia. That's where it's always started, and here we go. You know what? I didn't mind it being started in Bahrain, Adam, because the time difference really favored us. Like we were, doing a show at 10 in the morning, and that on a Sunday, and that's fine with me. Now it's going to be like 2 in the morning.
Yeah. Yay. Yay. Well, it's been a really productive year, and especially for you, Tim. I look at all the places you went, all the tracks you were at, all the amazing moments you saw. And I think specifically for me, the moment that I was living vicariously through you the most was Lewis Hamilton winning at Silverstone. I think that is that's one of the pinnacle moments. We're going to talk about this season sort of in a retrospective in a little bit here, but the plan is to do some more Tim traveling next year, is it not?
That's the plan. We'll see what happens. I don't want to all right, I got some conversations happening. I don't want to ruin anything that's could happen later on down the road, but that is the plan. Get back out, do some more races, hopefully we're able to cover the same amount that we did this year, if not more, which is
great. Amazing.
Yeah.
Especially when you're on the ground there. I think that is, there's just something special about those weekends. And I can tell as the other guy on this show, the difference in just the energy that you bring when you've been there, because it's like, there's just something about it, very raw.
Yeah. And I think, Adam, like, it's just like a lot of the information I get, like, like, it's, I'm on the phone, I'm working the phone, I'm sending text messages, all that kind of stuff. But like when I'm on the ground, I'm able to just walk over to those people, have a quick conversation, have a coffee, get more in depth. And then you start kind of drumming up stories that could be coming in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the things that you don't necessarily get when you're away from a racetrack. Yeah. So having been at like 11 races, I was able 10, 11 races, or 10, 11 events, I should say, able to drum up like quite a bit of news and intelligence that would help us with the show later on in the months coming. Or I'd give you a heads up like, hey, this is what I'm hearing and we should think about getting prepared for that.
Right.
And so not necessarily those things come to fruition, but it's always good to have an ear to the ground. I don't necessarily like talking about things that aren't really confirmed, because with Formula One, you just never know. Like, yeah. I mean, we could look really stupid, and I don't want us to look stupid. You know what I'm saying, Adam? Like, yeah, we're a little show here that's just trying to like chip away at it, man. And like,
absolutely,
I want us to make sure that whatever we hit on, we
hit it.
Yeah, we do a good job at that. So, I mean, being there, Adam, is it's a totally different animal. And yeah, I think it just allows us to do a better job of what we do.
Well, I think, looking at, we're going to talk a little bit about the season that was in 2024 in just a second here, but there's some news we'll have to sort of hit on, because not everything's been decided, because it's Formula One and the news is going at all times, all days of the year. But there's some Alpine stuff we got to talk about. There's some Red Bull stuff we got to talk about. It'd be nice if for postseason testing they were doing everything together for a bit, just a little bit longer. I know everybody wants to go home and see their families and be actually at home, but we'd like to get some clarity on some of these stories, even though the season is completely wrapped up. We'll get into that in a sec. Let's talk a little bit about the Formula One stats that are quite impressive. Tim sent this over to me, but some of the things that I want to bring up is, obviously 24 races. 24 races is a record. And they want to potentially add maybe more or have rotational things. And Tim, what was the response from the teams, on a 24 race calendar? There's a lot of concern about how tiring it was, a lot of travel, a lot of long days, a lot of overnights for the engineers. Yeah. What do is there room for one or two more? And if there isn't, what do you think Formula One does with some of these calendar dates that, there's circuits in Portugal and Turkey. There's been talk of South Africa. What do you do with some of these races that might want to jump onto the calendar?
I think the cap is 24. To be honest with you, I think the cap's probably 21 or 22. I mean, okay. This was a lot. You could definitely see it on team personnel's face. You could definitely hear it in their voice when you spoke with them, had conversations. I mean, I think it's great for the sport that it's been able to grow as much as it has, and it's as big as it is. And that countries are really demanding, like they really want it to come to their country. And having a rotational leg, I think, is smart. I think that would work really well. I think some of the teams need to think about having even more rotational team personnel. Because it gets to the point where, I mean, Adam, like I didn't even do a triple header. I got close to doing 2 triple headers. And even I was just like,
covering it, you're exhausted.
I just don't even know. Like what I do when I'm there, there's a lot of walking involved. Like I would say every day I would average 32,000 steps. Like no questions, because it's paddock's big. Media centers, you got to get there. I mean, Vegas for sure. It's a long one for walking. Abu Dhabi did a lot of walking in Abu Dhabi as well. I think the circuits do their best to make sure that everything is set up with minimal physicality involved. But let's face it, I mean, it's a massive sport and physicality has to get involved at some point. So for what I do, a lot of walking involved, tons of walking. And so, that's fine. But my days are long. They're not, I'm just giving people what my days are like. My days are like anywhere from 12 to 14 hours.
Right.
And Adam, like my schedule and how you and I have to go back and forth and try and nail down a time where we can do the show. And sometimes we're doing a show midnight wherever I'm at.
Yep.
And it's like morning for yourself. And I had been working already the entire day since like 7 in the morning.
Or you stepped off a plane and walked right to your studio, your home studio, and we would go on the air.
Yeah. After a 14-hour flight or whatever. And so
that's amazing.
And so like I can see team personnel getting really exhausted by the calendar. I don't know how you condense it into a smaller calendar. It's really challenging, right? You would have more triple headers, but then more triple headers could incite more burnout.
Yeah.
And you don't want to do that. And so I think F1 has done a really good job of just trying to make sure that they are putting races in certain hemispheres and just kind of nailing those ones out before moving on to another part of the world.
Yeah.
I think as we keep going through this, I think F1 is only going to get better at evolving the calendar to keep everything centralized. So we're going to this part of the world, then we're going to go to this part of the world, then we're going to go to this part of the world, and we're going to do our races, boom, 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 bang them out, head to the next thing, et cetera, et cetera. I think the teams as well are going to adapt as well. I mean, I can already see it. So they can take care of their work personnel at the same time. And this is all just a work in progress, right? I don't think it's hit everyone really fast, right, Adam? 24 races is like when you look at these numbers that I sent to you, I mean, you can understand now why that Formula One needs to capitalize on just how popular it's become.
Yeah, and it mentions in this press release the majority of Grand Prix weekends this year welcome more than 300,000 fans across the weekend. Season attendance is 6.5 million versus 6 million last year. 17 of them were sold out. 10 new attendance records, 4 race weekends with over 400,000 attendees, including Australia, Great Britain, Austin, and Mexico City. 11 race weekends with over 300,000, including Canada, Austria, Hungary, Belgium, Netherlands, Monza, and Las Vegas. Those are just staggering numbers. They're crazy.
Crazy.
And
honestly, Adam, think about it for a second. Sorry to cut you off.
No, go.
What other sporting event do you know of that has numbers that you just read out?
Oh, nothing. I mean, maybe cricket. Maybe the cricket world, cricket is crazy numbers, but not like that across the entire world in every hemisphere on every continent, with the exception of Africa. Excuse me. It's Tim. This is an unbelievable amount of people, amount of interest. You look at the social and digital. They go through their YouTube's up 16%, TikTok's up 23%, Instagram's up 25%. They launched less than a year since launch, we have 7 million subs to their F1 WhatsApp channel. I don't even know about that. I didn't even know it existed. And the unique F1 app users are up 52% year over year, Tim. The sport is growing. I think it helps, too, to have a title bout the way that we did, right?
Right.
McLaren, Ferrari, Red Bull, all in there for the constructors. Lando versus Max for a good chunk of the season, I think is really, really healthy for the sport.
Yeah, I agree.
And then you look at, and these numbers are nuts. This is crazy to me. So some new records across linear TV. And for those who don't really know or care or pay attention, just to give you some context, your linear television across the world is going through a significant change. We've seen it in North America, I think, a little bit faster than they've seen it in Europe, especially in the UK and Australia is not in Europe, but still English speaking. A lot of those countries that are not next to the United States are having an easier time with the transition from, traditional to digital outlets because it's slower. Whereas Canada, the United States, it's very fast. A lot of cable cutting, that sort of thing. But what they're seeing on what cable companies and cable outlets still have is access to the live event programming, and that's running the race and the and Formula One practice, which they never used to air, and Formula One qualifying, which sometimes you used to get, but it was pre-recorded or something like that. Not anymore. Miami Grand Prix, most watched race in U.S. history. 3.1 million Americans were tuned in. That's just the United States alone, that's crazy.
Yeah, and especially on the day, especially the month and the day, right, Adam? Like a Sunday in May in the United States, and believe it was on ABC as well. ESPN doing a really great job of bumping that race up. But that's a massive number. It really is for F1 in the US, which is a market that, I mean, let's be honest here, F1 has really tried to go after here over the last few years. It's a great place to start from because they're noticing now that the American number is really starting to come up. The American fan base is really starting to learn, engage, and watch the races. I mean, heck, Adam, like our show, like a big part of our show that we do here is viewed by Americans.
Yes.
It is, right? Like we have a very strong North American demographic, and then we have our strong European demographic that's also mixed in as well. And I think that shows you the appetite for Formula One in the United States. And I think that's only going to keep growing. It's only going to keep going up because the numbers, the demographic, like it's all skewing towards a younger audience at the same time, which is great, right? If we go back to 2017, I mean, I don't think those numbers they're not that strong. Let's be honest here. And at the same time, Formula One's in a difficult spot. Like they are in a very difficult spot in 2017. And then Liberty comes in, snaps everything up. They know what to do here, and they have a plan, and they've been executing on that plan. And as they've been executing on the plan, everything else is coming along with it. And we can sit here and like glaze Drive to Survive and all this other kind of stuff. It has a purpose. It serves a purpose. It helped us get to where we're at. But we also need to acknowledge what F1 has done on the social and digital side.
Yes.
Because it's it's such an important thing. Adam, the numbers you read out are, I mean, they're at like 96 million total for social media. I mean, if you go back to 2018, 18.7 million. Like that growth it's insane, astronomical, right?
Yeah.
But that shows you that the amount of effort that they've put in to cultivating their digital and their social has also helped on the race broadcast side. It's really helped activate the race broadcast side.
Yeah, and you look at going back to China, for instance, here. China, the Chinese Grand Prix.
Oh, that number is massive, man.
It's crazy. We haven't had one since 2019, but it used to be known as a little bit of an underfollowed thing, where it was a growth market, but the growth hadn't happened. Well, the growth happened. Chinese Grand Prix viewership, 14.8 million in China. That's up 50% over the 2019 race. That's just in China.
Yeah.
The Canadian Grand Prix was the most viewed race ever in Canada, with a worldwide viewing audience of 17.4 million people, which is just outrageously big. British Grand Prix was the most viewed European race ever, with 22.4 million global viewers. And it's obviously something that we're seeing a ton of growth everywhere. The interest is there because the characters are amazing and the drama is incredible, and it's an extreme sport. And it isn't every day or every weekend. It's a special event when a Grand Prix happens, even with 24 of them. People make time for a Formula One race. And I think that's what makes the sport so spectacular. It's just it was such a great year for it. And it's so nice to see. Now, the great thing too is that it's growing it's growing it with women as well. And 16 to 24-year-old females are the fastest growing age sector. It's obvious, too, that, with Susie Wolf heading up the F1 Academy, that female-driven motorsports are important audiences, and that F1 is, glued to making that a thing. Because here's the deal. Listen, Susie Wolf believes, and I saw an interview with her the other day, and she believes that there will be a female F1 driver again. There have been in the past. She believes that there's going to be more. But I look at, the physicality of men and women is just genetically very different. And when I look at major sports across the globe, I look at hockey here in Canada, the growth of the PWHL. I look at women's tennis, which in many occasions is bigger than men's tennis. I look at the growth of women's golf, the WNBA, in Europe, the growth specifically of the Women's Premier League. I don't see a world, or I see a world where Formula One and Formula One Academy are 1-2, and where you're seeing, the goal isn't to necessarily race in F1; it's to race in my division of F1, if that makes sense. And I think if they grow that product, all of these numbers that they're seeing, Tim, in the next 20, 30 years can double, right? Okay, so, you had 22 million people tune into the British Grand Prix. What if you had 2 Grand Prix that weekend, right? It financially makes a ton of sense to have this be a more inclusive sport. And obviously with more people jumping in and more interest across the globe, it's going to be a far more competitive sport too.
Yeah, I think you get F1 Academy, and the fact is that you look at a lot of the talent that's in there now. I mean, there's some really good drivers, and now the goal is you got to move them up, right? You can't stay stagnant in F1 Academy. You've got to try and find a way of getting you got to find a way of getting them into F3, and then having them succeed in F3, and then moving them up to F2, and then having that promotion and having your ladder system really work for you, and really suss out the talent and where is the talent, right? And this is something that we never, I guess, like in my generation, you never really got to see, because so many drivers brought money. You were battling against drivers who just had way more money than you did, and there wasn't too much you could do about it, and they could buy things that you didn't have. And I think the more level playing field that you have with your academy systems, and be it F1 Academy, F3, F2 into F1, the more you're going to be able to filter out all that top talent. I mean, we've seen now for the past few seasons that the F2 champion doesn't necessarily move into an F1 seat. I mean, now we've seen that. Gabriel Bortoleto is going to be a Formula One driver next season. And that's really important. You need to start having your F2 champions, graduate into Formula One. And obviously this is a conversation about that for another time. But I mean, to see a woman rise through those ranks, really compete, and then place themselves in the right position to get into a Formula One seat. I mean, that's going to be huge. That's going to be a massive story. It will happen. And that is going to be massive for Formula One. And it's only going to increase these numbers too. And as we're able to tell that story, as it moves along, is even going to be even more important.
I can see it, a Caitlin Clark style, like somebody just explodes on the scene and moves their way up, and you're seeing, what that did for the WNBA just this year alone. It's amazing. Now we have some race renewals and some interesting race news that we haven't had the chance to talk about. So let's talk about this Chinese Grand Prix. At least 5 more years. Italian Grand Prix, at least 6 more years. Monaco, thank God, at least 6 more years. I know it's a parade. I get it, but it's a beautiful parade and we want it. The British Grand Prix, 10 more years. Japanese Grand Prix, 5 more years. Dutch Grand Prix is interesting because they're going to 2026, and then Madrid will join in 2026, replacing the Dutch Grand Prix. Is there any insight, Tim, that you can offer there? Why did that happen? Is it a money thing?
No, you know what, Adam? I think when it comes down to it, partially money, tried to keep it there. And yeah, it's a strange one because it's such a popular race. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm trying to go to it next year. That's one of the races that I want to attend and that I've been pushing to attend for next season. But it's just interesting to see it just all of a sudden, fall off the calendar like that when you kind of look at how popular it is, how much the region really comes out and supports it. I mean, it helps
Yes.
that, Max is doing quite well for them to come out and support it. But yeah, I mean, the organizers having made that decision that 2026 will be their final year at Zandvoort, I mean, that's quite sad, I would say. Could they put it somewhere else? Possibly, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's not say that it's over forever and F1 is never going back to the Netherlands. I mean, we don't know that. So at this moment, the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort is finished after 2026, but we don't know what's coming down the road later. That's one
Right.
of the things that I would highlight because we do have a lot of listeners who listen to us who live in the Netherlands.
That's right. That's right. The calendar looks to be the same for next year. The driver lineup will not. We're going to have 4 rookies, we think, on the paddock. But Tim, there's one in particular I'm concerned about. It's Alpine's Jack Doohan, and I am concerned about him starting because the rumors are that Alpine and Williams are still in discussions about Franco Colapinto, and that Williams has come out and said, hey, listen, there is a price here. They're going to have to pay it for us to release. Doohan was the guy that Alpine has developed. He's come up through their system for years, kind of like what Oscar Piastri, did. I know that Flavio Briatore is a mover and a shaker. And I know, for instance, I know that he's going to stop at nothing to put that brand back on top. What do you know about this situation? How likely is it that Jack is not starting and is back to reserve driver status in 2025?
I mean, when I spoke with Jack, he seemed pretty confident that he was going to be there. Granted, I know he has to be confident in that. I mean, he seemed confident, I should say, instead of he was confident. But I couldn't see them doing that to him, only because I think things have started to cool down on Franco Colapinto.
Okay.
I don't think that, I should say, I think his crashes, haven't done him any favors. And I think we saw from Franco towards the end of the season just that a little bit of rookiness starting to show itself. I mean, that crash in Las Vegas, it probably shouldn't have happened. Brazil. And so when you look at some of the, let's call them rookie mistakes, which they are, I mean, that will affect you. These teams will see it immediately. And that can cool conversations pretty quickly.
It's crazy how quickly it did cool things,
Yeah,
honestly.
I know. I mean, that's the tough thing about Formula One, right, Adam? It's like you got to be perfect all the time. Like, that's what teams expect. They expect every time. I mean, look at Pierre Gasly. No damage, like, all season. Come on.
That's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what they're looking for. They don't want to have to pay for crash damage. They want to make sure you're as competitive as your teammate. They want to make sure that every time you're getting in the car, that's it. That's the most the car can do. There's nothing left on the table every single time. Practice, qualifying, race, practice, qualifying, race, practice, qualifying, race, testing, all of it. Every time you're in the car, always the best. You're always getting the best. No mistakes. And that's the way you kind of got to be now with this type of Formula One. These teams are spending a lot of money on drivers, yes, but they're also expecting like the best. So, we'll see what happens with Franco. I mean, he's definitely not going anywhere anytime soon. Like he's going to be in and around Formula One in some capacity, whether that's going to be a reserve driver for Williams or who knows, maybe taking over Jack Doohan's seat at Alpine, which I highly doubt will happen. It would be silly of Alpine to do that. It really would. Like, that would be a real, like,
is that them overthinking it, do you think?
Yeah, like, come on. Like, you have to remember that Jack's been a part of this family for years. Like, he knows everybody. He's worked with everyone. And remember how I always say in the show, Adam, you and I always talk about this, and I always say that it's, like, so important to have those relationships.
Yep.
So people know you when you get in the car. They know what you want. They know how you drive. They know. They already are expecting certain things from you, and they know what you want in the car. And so all of those things are so crucially important. You're going to bring in a new guy who's, rookie, and, into a team that's like just sort of starting to rebuild itself after it's just been shot in the foot so many times over the last few seasons. And then all of a sudden you're just going to take a guy who's been one of your pillars and just remove him. That doesn't make any sense. It really does. That is not going to help you. It's not. Okay.
Well, hey, that's fair. The other thing I think that we're all sort of anxiously awaiting is, we see that the results from Yuki Tsunoda's test were pretty damn good. And our old friend Helmut Marko was in the German paper saying he was pretty impressive. Well, listen, the guy's a treasure trove of information. I'm not sure it supports his drivers, but
he does like talking.
But he loves a chat. He loves a chat. And I like that. That's good for us. So Tim, I look at Yuki, and I know that Honda also had a meeting with Red Bull to talk about Yuki's future, because Honda and Red Bull are parting after next season. Then it's going to go to quote unquote Red Bull powertrains, but they'll be Ford powered. The question will become at that point, Fernando has mentioned that this season probably is going to be his last. Like, once his contract expires, he's thinking that might be it. Yuki's got the relationship with Honda. It's been long speculated Aston Martin could make a lot of sense, but it's pretty damn clear, Tim, that Yuki's the best other driver that Red Bull has in the program right now. And they've spent all this time and all this money developing him. He had a great test in the Red Bull car. He said it felt like home. What do you think happens there?
Well, first of all, I'll clear up the Fernando Alonso stuff, because he's going to be there until 2027.
2027. Oh, sorry, my bad.
He's got to see what Adrian Newey's 2026 car is going to look like, what it's going to be, because you never know, right? I think for Fernando, it's just hang on until 2026. Let's see what type of a car we get from there, and let's see if I can go and win another world championship from then on out, right? And granted to it, I want to see it. So yes, let's just put that there.
Okay.
As for Yuki, had a great test, no question about it. Feedback was more, from what I was told, more than what Red Bull was expecting. I don't think they were expecting the level of detail that he was able to provide. I think that was surprising to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, that's shown him to be worthy of Max Verstappen's teammate if Sergio Perez does leave this seat, which we all think he probably is, and we may hear more about that later on this week, because now the shareholders are involved with those conversations, and they're important conversations. So we'll see how those end. We should have more news on that, hopefully, by the end of the week. We'll see. But that being said, Yuki's put himself in a good position to make an argument to be Max Verstappen's teammate. And I think that's all he ever wanted, right? He just wanted them to take him seriously, and so they could see what he could do, because he believes he can go up against Max.
Yes.
And I think also, he didn't seem too put off by the way that this car is developed compared to, we saw Sergio really struggle with it, right? And we've seen other drivers come in and struggle with a car that's been designed for Max Verstappen. Yuki didn't really have that, from what I was told. And so all of those things are really, really positive. And so I think if he could make an argument, then they would give him a consideration. I think he's made the argument. I think now it just comes down to what happens next with that second seat at Red Bull Racing.
It's the question that everybody's been asking for 2 years now. I mean, honestly,
Adam, I think you and I have been asking that question for the last 6 months.
the entire time I've been on the show, Tim, the question is, like, obviously when you're signed to Red Bull, I think Nate Saunders was the guy that kind of sort of outlined this week. But when you're signed to Red Bull, you're signed to Red Bull Global. You're not signed to the team per se. And so, what happens with Sergio Perez is he could become a very highly paid ambassador. And, before anybody laughs at that, okay, this is an English podcast. We speak to English speaking people on the whole, but Sergio Perez, his fan, I mean, Tim,
Huge.
Speak to Mexico. What's it like in Mexico for Sergio?
Huge. We don't even understand it up here. Like, it's huge, massive, bigger than, like, even in the States, they don't even know. Like, it's huge. You go there and there's Sergio Perez on every single billboard. Fans packed that circuit just for him. He qualified last. They still showed up to cheer him. Like, it was incredible. Every time he went through that baseball stadium, man, you could just hear the fans like roar. We don't get it. Honestly, we don't. It's he has a massive fan base. Massive. And I think, Adam, like you and I did discuss him coming on as a brand ambassador about 2 months ago, maybe. Actually, no, it was after Mexico. You and I had this conversation, and I said that would be a good move. And I said that would be the best move, would be to hold on to him as a brand ambassador, reserve driver, test driver, whatever you want, whatever he wants, but keep him at the team because of how big that fan base is of his. It is enormous.
It's huge. It's huge. Tim, one of the things that came up this past couple of weeks, and then we found out in a social media post it's probably not going to happen, is Daniel Ricciardo emerging as a favorite for Cadillac, and how that makes a lot of sense.
We talked about this, Adam. You and I talked about.
We did. Now, what was funny is the social media post is somebody actually goes up to Daniel at a meet and greet and goes, "Are you coming to Cadillac?" And he goes, No, I'm done. And whether or not that's true, because, listen, you put enough money in front of somebody, everybody's got a price. Daniel's very, very marketable. But you know what makes a lot of sense for Cadillac in this hemisphere? Checo. Because if he still has some juice left, right? And you're trying to target a luxury car market and this car is made in the United States and therefore easy to ship to the entire hemisphere, North and South America. It'd be great to have an American driver or a driver who does well in America, like a Daniel Ricciardo. And it'd be great to have a guy like Sergio who covers Latin America, because you're trying to sell the brand. The team probably won't be great to start. If they are, amazing. Mm-hmm. But let's be honest, they are going to use a Ferrari engine, so that's good. Mm-hmm. But Haas has used a Ferrari engine for years and have been good and bad. Mm-hmm. You don't know what you're going to get, and new teams usually don't do well. So you need great drivers to market the brand while GM is putting together its own powertrain and the team is figuring out all of the things that it needs to figure out. I think Sergio, for me, makes so much sense at a brand like Cadillac in 2026. I don't think he's done in Formula One, Tim. Even if he's not on the grid next season, this guy is a competitive, a solid as a rock driver and has been his entire career. I don't think he's just done. I think the car didn't agree with him, and I think he was under a lot of fire and a lot of pressure, and the pressure got to him. But I think the talent is still very much there.
I agree. I think the same. I just think if you're going to try and find a way of bridging the gap from 2025 to 2026, you'll have to find a way of keeping his foot in an F1 car to some capacity. Like, we talked about this race seat with Cadillac, for the last few pods. Mm-hmm. And, I've always I've already brought up the drivers who, probably they should go with. I did never once did I say Daniel Ricciardo, and I think that's no slight against Daniel Ricciardo. Mm-hmm. It's from the fact that just don't think he really wants to deal with Formula One anymore.
Yeah.
And look, the way things have ended for him, I get that. And you had said it perfectly, though. You throw enough money at somebody, right? And they'll do stuff, okay? That they will. But the thing for Daniel is he would have to find a way of like keeping his foot in it.
Yeah. Yep.
You just can't. You can't have a year off.
No, you can't.
It's too hard. There's just no way. Even though you'd be coming back to a new regulation, new type of a car, new type of engine regulation, there'd be so much more coming at you. How prepared will Cadillac be? Will they have their own simulator? Are they going to borrow someone's simulator? I assume they're probably going to be borrowing Ferrari's simulator until they get one of their own. So there's so many moving parts to it. If I'm the team principal and let's say Valtteri Bottas signs reserve driver deal with Mercedes, he does all their testing, does all their sim, does everything. I'm taking Valtteri. That's what I'm doing all day. I'm taking him to be like my number one. And then I've got a choice of probably 3 Americans. That's either going to be Jack Crawford, Kyle Kirkwood, Colton Herta. That's what I'm looking at. And if I'm team principal of Cadillac, that's what I'm doing.
Well, it's going to be an interesting time with that. Now, Tim, when we look back on this season, and by the way, just so anybody who's, those of you who've been with us have been super faithful. And, it's encouraging every time I'm at a live event for the Steve Dangle podcast, how many people come up and go, did you see the race? I got a question on a show I recorded today, Tim, just how about that papaya? Like just people, really, and it's because the sport's growing and it's because the show's growing, which is awesome. So for anybody wondering what's going to happen with the show, Tim and I, if there's huge news that breaks, like, Lewis signs with Ferrari, then we'll jump in and do a show. When we know what's going on with that second Red Bull seat, you can expect a show. When we know what's happening with Checo, even if they're a little bit shorter, we're still going to do them. But we're going to return in full right around the time Drive to Survive comes out. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about testing. Tim, the plan is probably to go for testing again. So, we'll cover all of that once the liveries are back and that sort of thing. But we're going to rush the show a little bit this offseason because it's important to go away so that you can be missed. As I always like to say to the guys on my other show, sometimes it's good to be missed. It's okay to be missed. And that's what we're going to do. So, Tim, when you look back on this season, it is one of the most eventful. And it's crazy because you compare it to 2023, which was one of the most uneventful. You go to 2023, not a single driver change from 22 to 23, right?
Yep.
And then 23 to 24, the first one, bang, announced.
It's a big one.
And it's Lewis Hamilton. And that overshadowed some other stuff that had happened previous to that. But starting from there, I think that was the starting gun on the season. Tell me what you think, what stands out to you this year, what made it special? Because I think it was a great year.
There's just so much. I sat down with a good friend of mine at one of the teams in Abu Dhabi to have a coffee. And I was basically like, I think we just lived someone's life in 1 year. Like that's that's how much we had absorbed, gone through, traveled, just all of it. And it's so hard for me to just pick one point because I think as the season evolved and I got to travel to different places that I've never been, I evolved as a person as well. And things you learn along the way. And I'm so very grateful of all of the stuff I got to do this year. I'd never know if I'm ever going to do this again next year. I have no idea what's coming down the pipeline. I couldn't tell you. But all I know is that for this year, for myself, I had so much fun. I met so many great people, heard so many great stories, made some really true and very lasting friendships. And everyone might be rolling their eyes right now, but I'm dead serious. No shit. I have been involved in racing my whole life. I have raced at some of the highest levels that anyone could, achieve. And I have never traveled, learned so many different cultures, people in 1 year than I did this year. It was tremendous. Starting everything off in Bahrain was that I never thought I'd get to do that. never once did I think I would get to go to Bahrain, Adam, and cover testing, cover the first race of a season. I just never expected to do that ever.
Mm-hmm.
And it was incredible. And I think like that's that jumping off point where, you know, we got to testing, we started doing the pod more, and it was just basically like, what's this season going to be like, Tim? And in my head, I'm like, oh, I saw Verstappen out on track today, and it's, you know,
it's looking like it's him.
he is the season.
Yeah.
That's what it was looking like. And then he finished the race with like a 22-second lead over second place, and the Ferraris were the closest thing. And I was like, oh God.
Yep. Yeah.
Not again. But then when we got to Australia, Max had his issues, but Carlos was on it. We had a great finish there. And that gave me, greater enthusiasm for the rest of the season. It was already quite high, but I think like that moment when Carlos Sainz won in Australia, I was like, yes, all right, that's what we needed. I'm in, because I knew the teams were going to keep developing. I knew that they were going to catch Red Bull. I even said it on this podcast. It was like the first 4 or 5 races, they're going to be tough. But I said, once we got to race 7, race 8, race 9, we're going to start seeing different things. And sure enough, and nobody else was saying that, mind you.
No, you did call that. You did call that. And I have to give you your flowers on that one, man, because it was from that perspective, from that first race perspective, boy, that was hard to believe.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be true,
Yeah.
but I said that, but it's just, sometimes you kind of go, I don't know if I can I conceptualize that? And it was such a dominant Red Bull thing the year before that you're just kind of like, I hope Tim's right, but like, I guess I'll just wait and find out.
It was just like the people I spoke with, like people in the teams, people I know, just able to lean on them and just like really say, like, do you think like, they're going to, and no one really believed that they were going to, when Dan Fowles told me that they were going to win a race this year, that's when he came out and said that to me publicly. That's when I knew we were okay. Like stuff's going to come. It's just not going to be right away. We're going to have to wait for it. But when it gets here, look out. Sure enough, once it got here, once Miami rolled around, I went down to McLaren to do a piece with Andre Stella for TSN. And they had unleashed this huge update on Lando Norris's car. I think Oscar only got 50% of it, if I remember correctly. And I remember we were working with Lando's car, and I was looking at it, and I was like, God damn. I'm like, this is a totally different car, man. And we were off air, and he's like, oh, yeah, like we did a lot to it. I'm like, yeah, you did do a lot to it. And so we started talking about it. And the more I spoke with Stella about the car, the more I was like, I think they're going to win this weekend. Because of the amount of updates, what they believed was going to happen with the car, and the driver that they gave it to. And all those things factored in. I wasn't really expecting good quality pace, and they didn't qualify very well. I think Lando was like, he was like 7th or 8th. He qualified, something like that. And once they got into the race, and I think it was like 10 or 15 laps into it. No, it was probably a bit more than that. It's almost 20 laps maybe. And I was sitting in the media center, and I was like, Lando hasn't pitted yet. And I'm like, but he hasn't, he's not, and I can notice he's not really pushing. But everybody else around him was. Like Max was pushing up front. Sergio also was pushing. Everybody in front of Lando was really pushing. And I was like, but he just didn't seem like he was pushing. And then Max pitted, and then a couple other things. And then he started to unleash his pace. And this was like, I can't remember what tire he was on. I think it might have been the medium, if I remember correctly, his first stint. But when he was like deep into that first stint, and the lap time he started to pull out, then I was like, oh shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, here we go.
Yeah. And it really happened from there. So Tim, let me run you through some categories. Okay.
Let's
Who's your driver of the year?
Oh, it's got to be Max.
Does it?
For me, I think so. Just because of, I would say, when we got to, I gotta say Spa. We got to around then. I was like, they're in it. Like they're in trouble. Like Red Bull's in trouble, and I'm like, I don't think they're going to get out of it. I really don't. And it was Verstappen, the one who got them out of it. Yeah, sure. I mean, like the team and everybody worked together to give him what he needed to try and extract some performance out of the car. But for the most part, he was the difference maker with this car. He was the one who took them to some victories. He was the one who made sure that they held on to some point scoring positions. He was the one that, he made sure that they held on to podium places. He raced Norris hard, what he needed to do. He did what he needed to do on that front. Some people may like it, some people may not, but that guy did what he had to do to secure a world championship. And Brazil this season is one of the greatest races I've seen from a driver in a very long time.
That's pretty cool.
What do you think?
Driver of the year for me. Yeah, I mean, I think it's so apropos to go with a world champion in this case, because he really didn't have the best car after race 8, race 9, and he really did get everything out of that car.
Fourth slowest car on the grid, Adam.
Yeah, I think you're bang on with that with Tim, and for all the reasons you mentioned. And also let's also not forget what happened in the beginning of the season, where Red Bull, the team, was blowing up from inside.
Oh,
it was bad. Terrible press around Christian Horner. Terrible press around Jos Verstappen trying to oust Christian Horner. Red Bull Global divided along the Mateschitz and then the other family that owns them, and I keep forgetting their names.
There's the Austrian side, which is
the Austrian and the Thai side, basically.
Thai side, yeah.
And the Thai side backing
is Uvidya. And Austria is the Austrian side.
Yeah,
49% they own, and then Uvidya's own
51%, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So the Thai side bag, all that. Max is able to put all that in the rearview mirror and just race. And I have to. As much as sometimes I'm like, man, the guy, George Russell was right. He is a bully on the track. He's right. He's absolutely right. It's like, it is time for somebody to do something about it. Max is a world flippin' champion for a reason. And, when you talk about the same two drivers having the same car and different outcomes, I understand why Sergio perhaps, and Max is a very specific driving style. It's made for him. It's not made for Sergio, all that. The reality is Max did things with that car that majority of that grid could not do. And so Tim, I have a feeling it won't be Red Bull, but your team of the year.
Well, I just want to, a couple more drivers, because I think that there are some that deserve like at least a shout out, right? I mean, all respect to Lando Norris, who was great. Same as Charles Leclerc. Oscar Piastri.
I'm gonna come back to the driver category. Don't worry, I got another one for you.
Okay.
Don't worry. We're gonna do the teams, but I'm gonna go driver, best team, and then I'm gonna go most improved driver, most improved team.
All right. So I would say for teams, McLaren. I mean, just having having that will to win a constructors championship when you haven't won one in so long, 1998. And then if you're Andrea Stella, you've only been in charge of this team for a few years. And if you're Zach Brown, doing a great job of putting Andrea Stella in charge, and then having Stella take people who were maybe overlooked in the past at that team and put them in positions of power where he could utilize their talents. Because I think for him, he felt that there were some employees there that weren't utilizing their talent. They weren't utilizing their talents to the best of their ability. They weren't putting them in the places of power where they should have been. And I think a lot of credit needs to go to Andrea Stella for recognizing all of that, creating a tier system that, technically speaking, gets them components to the car that work and in a timely fashion. And I think when we look at the way teams construct their race cars, I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of them that are going to look at what McLaren does and adapt to what they are doing, because they didn't just take they took one big upgrade for Miami and they threw it at it, but they gave it time. They never rushed it.
Right.
It was never something that they knew they had it. Like they knew they had this thing back during their car launch. Like they knew this thing was coming, but they just weren't like, should we do it now? It was kind of like, no, let's wait and let's see what other information and data we can get from some other parts of the car, just so we can confirm that when we put this thing on, it's going to work. And then you look at some of the other teams, the way they've done things, and they just throw stuff at the car. Just throw it at the car. Just as fast as they could. Get it built, get it on it, and then all of a sudden they lose their way and they're chasing their tail like a dog. And so I think what McLaren has done will most likely be replicated by some teams. And I think they should, because I think what Stella has done with that team is pretty tremendous, Adam. If you go back 2 years and you tell me that 2025 McLaren's going to win a Constructors' Championship and Lando's more than likely going to push Max for a world championship, I'd say there's no friggin' way, because in 2023 they were gluing parts onto that car at the start of the season.
Yep. And Andreas Seidel, his predecessor, has now come and gone from another team too.
Exactly.
Stella's done a great job. Okay, Tim, most improved driver. And I would categorize this as the driver whose performance surprised you the most.
I would say Carlos Sainz. And I wouldn't say Carlos improved Sainz, because like I don't think I wouldn't say that like Carlos was bad the year before. What I would say is that Carlos like showed up. Like as soon as he knew that, okay, I'm now being ousted from my seat, he wasn't messing around. And every single race that he took part in, he was always there in some form or capacity. He was always hanging around a podium spot. He was hanging around a race win. He was just there. He still maintained that level of professionalism that I think a lot of us would have trouble doing and helping this team to try and win a Constructors' Championship. And I got a lot of respect for that. I have a lot of time for that as well, because, this is a guy who could have easily just mailed it in. Once Lewis Hamilton got announced, this guy could have just mailed it in for the rest of the season. Really could have. What does he have to worry about, right, Adam? Like, seats getting taken.
Bunch of teams are after him.
Yeah, why should he help? Why should he move over for Charles in certain races? Blah, blah, blah. But Carlos always made sure that he was the best driver for that team every time into the garage. And I'm not saying Charles Leclerc wasn't, because he was as well. And those two guys really pushed each other. They really did. I enjoyed watching that driver battle, that Ferrari driver battle. I really did. I really liked it. I would say Carlos Sainz, because I thought he was fantastic this year. I really did.
Most improved team.
I do want to say, I some parts of me wants to say Mercedes, but then like they were so inconsistent that I can't.
Yeah,
I would say Ferrari for me, because where they started at the beginning of the season, and I got on two teams really, Ferrari being one because of where they started. They had that huge drop off around Canada. They introduced that floor in Spain that just didn't work. They tried to figure it out from there. And then they came back the last 2 months, just like an incredible performance from that team to really rally, figure out what was wrong with the car, and instill confidence in the drivers, which they were lacking at some points. The other team is Haas. That is a team that, Adam, we go back to the start of this year, and I'm probably pretty sure I said it on here. They were going to finish dead last. They were going to be the worst team on the grid. Just because of the lack of finance that was put into them, not bringing back Gunther Steiner, and having a team principal who's never done it before. And wow, did that team just prove me wrong. And I cheered for them because they were this underdog team that a lot of us journalists, reporters, pundits, experts, whatever you want to call it, all thought there's no way Haas is going to be competitive this season. And man, did they ever just come out swinging.
Yeah.
It was great. I really enjoyed covering Haas this season. Hulkenberg has been awesome all year long. And then I think Magnussen, towards the end of the season, getting the braking issues that he was facing, getting those things sorted out, and really giving Hulkenberg everything that he can handle towards the end of the season.
Yeah.
What are yours?
I think since you took Haas, that's a good one. I'm going to give it to VCarb. They were inconsistent, but they were far more consistent than they were the previous year, where they were so bad it was crazy. The Racing Bulls, I think they're going to be called from going forward, which is what they should be called. I think that with the driver lineup changes, with the lack of consistency in the car, I think that they did pretty well given what they were given. I think Haas is the ultimate answer there, Tim. I think you're absolutely right. But I give VCarb a lot of credit for what they were able to pull through. They had a lot of negative attention when Ricciardo was switched out. They had a lot of, I thought there were a lot of times too where, Lawson or Tsunoda didn't reach their full potential at races. Sometimes it was based on the car. Sometimes it was based on driver error. And I think they could have done a lot better than they did, which is why I give them a second place to Haas on that. Because Haas squeezed every ounce of juice out of that lemon. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
They were awesome.
Oh, yeah.
And that car looks really fast. And I mean, I'm excited for Esteban Ocon. All of a sudden, he's stepping into a pretty cool team that's, punching above its weight and a little bit punk rock. And I just hope Gene Haas spends to the level that where he's capped out. Because they do, but they are still, in certain ways. But I think that I'd like to see Haas really become a contender. And listen, Gene's made his money like 10 times over what he bought that team for. Come on, Gene. Just make them real competitive, buddy. Get in there.
Now, who's your drivers?
Drivers most
driver, I guess I should say.
Most improved.
Yeah.
I would say it was really. I'm going back and forth here between Yuki Tsunoda and Oscar Piastri, because
those are good ones.
Yuki really set himself up as the leader of that team this year. Oscar was excellent, carried McLaren through the European leg in certain places, and I think. And also was a good teammate too. I think he is a future world champion. I'm hoping it's with Papaya, and I hope it's him and Lando at the top of the grid all year next year. I'd like to see a little bit more front row lockouts from the two of them. And they're both going to need to get a little bit sharper and meaner with the other cars on the track, not with each other. But man, Oscar Piastri just blew us all away this year, I think. And I think you see why Zach Brown was so excited to get him, and why Otmar was so pissed to lose him. Mm-hmm. He's a great driver.
He is. I was Oscar was going to be one of the drivers, but everyone I talk to in the paddock, we all say the same thing. I think all of us do. We just have that feeling that, Oscar is somebody really special.
Yeah.
And I can definitely see him being a world champion. But I also see that icy cold, FU that's just,
simmering
there. You can just see it, right? And I love that.
So Tim, I this won't be our last show, I don't think, this year. I think we've got probably our good friend Helmut Marko said it's going to be a couple more days till we find out what happened with Red Bull. So I'm sure we'll drop a pod on that one. But as far as our regular release schedule, this is it. And I just want to say a big thank you to our team, Hayden Matheson, who does all the production on this, Justin Fisher, who does all the thumbnails and social media. Obviously, Jesse, when he's needed to step in, has been amazing, Jesse Blake. And I want to thank you, Tim. You've done a brilliant job breaking down and sifting through all the crazy-ass rumors that you get in this sport, because the media is insane. And it's great to see a Canadian on the paddock, so well connected, who really knows his stuff. And I think that people are discovering Tim Hauraney in the way that we see you, which is you're one of the smartest racing minds, not just in Canada but in North America. And I just can't wait to see where things go for you, because I think where we're at with this show and where you're at with your career outside of this is just the beginning, man. And we're just really thrilled to be working with you. You've done an amazing job this year.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. I love working with you and the guys. I love our like group chat that we.
Our group chats are the best. The best.
It's pretty good. It's been nice. Yeah. Big thanks to everybody at SDPN. I mean, you guys have been awesome. Gotta thank everyone who watches and listens, because like honestly, like they're the ones who make the show. And all the questions that we've gotten really blown me away. I really didn't. I think you and I have had that discussion. We didn't really know where this was going to go. If it was going to go anywhere at all. I mean, it really does look like it is going somewhere. Like with the amount of growth that we've had in the last, like what, Adam, 12 months maybe.
It's been big.
Yeah, it's been massive. And so, I think it's that just goes to like everybody tuning in, watching, listening, supporting, which has been fantastic. And we can't do it without any of you. So that's my thank you goes to all of you who've watched and listened, supported, wrote nice messages, send us questions. Please keep doing it, because we're gonna keep doing it. So
Absolutely, we will. Tim, I'll say goodbye for now, but really, we'll probably be back in the next couple of days anyway. So
I think so.
Well, that's just the way this goes. But I hope your next 48 hours are fantastic until we catch up again.
I got a lot of Warhammer 40K.
Yeah, yes, I got to download it. Okay, that's the other thing. Tim has been playing Warhammer with Justin, and they've been talking about how great it is, and I've been refusing to download it because I was like, no, I have too much work to do. I'm going to download it in December. It's December 16th. I think it's almost time.
Yeah, I mean, like I've gotten back from Abu Dhabi and whatever, and went and saw Santa Claus. Did my old visit to Santa. Like
Me too.
Adam, you went and saw Santa as well.
Yeah.
And, then Justin and I got to get back onto our Warhammer 40K adventures, because I miss it.
Well, you know what? We'll let you get back to serving the Emperor, and we'll. I hope you have a fantastic week, sir. And if I don't talk to you, if we don't find out about Red Bull, have a great holiday. Okay.
You too, buddy.